Welcome back, students. We discussed about information literacy in detail. There are six different kinds of information. We looked at news information, we looked at publicity information, we looked at advertising information, we looked at entertainment information, we looked at propaganda information, and we looked at raw information. And we need to have very clear about what purpose do these information serve, whether the purpose of the information is to persuade, whether the purpose of information is to sell, whether the purpose of the image to enhance the image of a product, whether the purpose of the image is kind of just to entertain us, takes us to a different dimension, or whether the information has not gone through any kind of filters or editorial process. So this is how you need to have a very strong understanding to decipher the different categories of information. And moving on to the next step is a very important, crucial concept which I think you all should be very familiar with. Is called news literacy. Yes, we all are literate. We know how to read, write, and talk, but it's also important for us to have a very strong understanding of the different kinds of information and also news literacy. I also wanted to go through the assignment because I felt maybe you should need more insight, because as I told you, this is not something that you can just get it overnight. You have to, it becomes a muscle memory. You have to do this over and over and over again to be a part and parcel of your life. As I told you, these are the six neighborhoods. The goal of news is to inform, and it's been gathered by professional journalists. It gives us multiple perspectives, and they use language that is kind of standard. They don't use something that is just taken for granted. So we also need to know the language of the people, or how language is being used in that article. And propaganda, anything government materials or anything from a political party, the main aim is to persuade us or motivate us to do something. That can be propaganda. And main aim of advertisement is to sell, and the same applies to advertisement information as well. Similarly, publicity information is all about enhancing the quality of a product, of an image, or enhancing the image of a person. It can be anything. And entertainment, it's it diverts us from what's the important thing at hand, and gives us or distracts us to kind of immerse ourselves into a different reality. And raw information is any information that is not going through the editorial process or the third party verification. That is can be termed raw information. So armed with these information, let's discuss about what all the other things are. Let me pull you. So the first one is propaganda, because that was an video posted by MFN Iraq. So it's nothing but it's a branch of the defense, US Department of Defense, where they wanted to disseminate some information about the war that's happening in Iraq. And I think a lot of people would have thought, oh, it's raw information, like blah blah and all that. If you had noticed in the beginning of the video, there will be a website link. Its case is MFN Iraq, and if you click on that, it'll take you to the US Department of Defense website. So this is how you develop that keen sense of how to look into all those fine details and information, and how you can come to a conclusion whether this is information that we can trust or not. And again, we saw this screenshot of Steve Jobs posing in front of Apple. This is definitely a publicity, because anything like a logo, they're trying to kind of reinforce the quality of Apple and all that. So you should be able to look into all this minute details. And again, as I told you, you will have to work again and again on this. I think I have a screenshot of I know my thing is cluttered, so let me pull up the screenshot. Yes, here it is. And the next one was a Nazi. It was a triumph of the will. It's purely propaganda. And again the news was very entertaining, because a lot of people think, oh, this sounds like a news, because it had such a professional look to it. You have a very good news reader, doctor, brain neurosurgeon is talking about it, and the parents are very worried about it. So again, it's meant for very elite intellectuals to understand the satire of the news. Because if it's going to be someone who doesn't have any sense of how media mixes all this different information, people will be lost. I think a lot of people took that seriously and they posted it on Facebook, and even some online sites carried that as important news. So that's how misleading people are, and you have to be always careful. And we saw a traffic accident during a winter storm. That's raw information because it doesn't go through any process of veritori filter. People might even use it in a news channel. For instance, Fox might have used it, or CNN might have used that footage, but that doesn't mean it's something credible. Okay, it's coming on news, so it's definitely going to be news information. No. So we'll have to focus on all these kind of small details so that we have a clear understanding of what kind of information is. And again, the next one was practically a news. It was a news information. It was gathered by professional journalists. It gives you multiple perspectives with some authorities interviews and also people who are involved. And the last one was song. Okay, again, songs are nothing but just it entertains us. It makes us feel good. So this is how you should be able to kind of analyze all the different kinds of information. So let's get started with today's class. Main thing is, as I told you, we have to discuss about news in literacy. But I also wanted to play this video so that you have a kind of an idea of what we're discussing
One
about.
of the great sights in all the world, the beautiful Statue of Liberty in the harbor and the sun setting. For almost 3 years, our next guest had one of the toughest jobs there is. He was the White House press secretary for President George Bush. And this is his best-selling book entitled What Happened? Please welcome Scott McClellan. Oh, Scott, come on out and tell us what happened. We're wearing the same suit. What does that tell you?
I almost wore that tie, too.
Exactly, sir. You were supposed to be here last week, and there was trouble, lightning and bad weather. You couldn't get out of Washington D.C. You got here late. I'm happy you came back.
Well, I'm glad to be here.
Are you tired of being? I mean, the book is #1 on the bestseller list. Are you tired of going on shows like this to try and talk up the book?
Some of the other shows, not your show. I'm glad to be here tonight.
Now that raises an interesting question. Do people, now knowing about the book, do they have the correct impression of the book? Or do they have an impression of a small part of the book?
Well, I think they're starting to get the impression, the larger message in the book, which is really about changing the way Washington governs for the better and making sure we don't repeat some of the mistakes that we did over the last few years. And that's really the larger message. The initial reaction was what you would expect to some extent. It got a little more vitriolic and personal than I expected from some of my former colleagues.
Now, looking back on the reaction, was this something you're sorry you included, or you had planned to include and are happy you included it?
No,
part of the book.
Which part of the book?
The part where you're sort of assailing your former bosses, the administration.
No, I feel very good about what I wrote. It was me speaking for myself now, candidly, talking about what happened, how things got off course, and what we can learn from that. And so that I feel good about.
Yeah.
And I hope it encourages more people to do the same, because we need that for history's sake.
See, I look around, and everything you just said there, and what coalesces in my mind is that we're just screwed. Are we just screwed? Honestly, I get the feeling that we're screwed. Do you have that feeling?
I'm an optimistic guy, and I think things are going to change. It's just a matter of time. I really
know you had a relationship with the president before he was the president.
That's true.
Well, what can you tell us about the guy? How does he feel? I mean, it looks to me like if I was doing the job he's doing, or the job I think he's doing, I wouldn't go to work.
Well,
does he have a sense of?
I feel that way sometimes. Looking at that Mark Wahlberg script you showed, give me a second.
But does he have a sense of, oh man, I'm in trouble, or things are fine, or what is his position on the way things are now?
It's amazing. He doesn't spend a lot of time reflecting. I think he should spend more time reflecting. Right. But he really believes history's going to vindicate him. He really sincerely believes that 30, 40, 50 years from now, things are going to be viewed a lot differently.
Okay, the same interview by Scott McClellan, it again is broadcast on another platform, and I want you to listen to this.
With me now is Scott McClellan, author of What Happened Inside the Bush White House and Washington's Culture of Deception. Scott, the New York Times editorial page today said your book belongs in the genre of, quote, I knew it was a terrible mistake, but I didn't mention it until I got a book contract. Why didn't you come forward with these criticisms earlier?
Well, first of all, I think when you're inside the White House bubble, some of the larger truths can sometimes be obscured. You are working for someone you have a lot of affection for. You're working 24/7, and sometimes it's hard to step back from what's going on and reflect upon it. And there are a lot of things that I believed at the time that later turned out not to be correct. And when I went back and had time to reflect upon it as I wrote this book, I came to some conclusions that were different from what I felt previously.
But you didn't feel it at the time?
Well, no, there are some things, as readers will see when they read the book. They'll see my perspective during those times, like the build up to the war in Iraq. I talk about my personal feelings during that time frame. I was deputy press secretary at the time, filling in every now and then for Ari, my predecessor. But I give them a perspective. It's very similar to, I think, a lot of Americans, that we seem to be moving pretty quickly into this war. But I was willing to give the president and his foreign policy team the benefit of the doubt.
You called it a propaganda campaign. Can you give me an example of how propaganda was used during this time period?
Sure, and I do in the book. What I'm referring to is basically the selling of the war and how it's done like a campaign.
But specifically,
and I talk about how the intelligence, as the war accelerated, the build up to the war accelerated, became a little more certain. Intelligence of high confidence was combined with intelligence of lesser confidence and packaged together to portray a grave and gathering danger with Iraq. And we now know that a lot of that intelligence was wrong, but at the same time, you have to look at how that intelligence was used. You referenced the New York Times editorial today. They talk about that, and that was something we never wanted people to really look at. It was the intelligence was wrong, but we also went about this in a less than open and forthright way,
so you're
in my
saying
view.
The intelligence was manipulated? Because
No.
your former colleagues are saying they had to trust what the CIA was telling them.
I'm saying that caveats were dropped over time, that contradictory intelligence wasn't talked about. So the American people didn't have that full, open, and forthright view of exactly what it said.
So it was manipulated.
That I think would have benefited.
It wasn't inclusive.
I think manipulated suggests that the intelligence was changed, and I want to view it that way. The intelligence was what it was, but we took that intelligence and then portrayed it and packaged it in a way to make it sound more grave and more urgent and more ominous than it was.
In other words, it wasn't inclusive. It did not include contrary intelligence.
Well, that's true. That is true, absolutely.
While you were press secretary, you were famous for denying access to reporters who asked tough questions. And now you're criticizing the press for not being tough enough. So isn't that the height of hypocrisy?
Well, and the build up to the war, and it's the National Press Corps as a whole, that there could have been more done to ask the tough questions. What happened, this is again how the press becomes complicit enablers in this permanent campaign culture by focusing on the march to war rather than the necessity of war. That's where the emphasis and focus was, when I think the emphasis and focus should have been more on finding out the truth. And I talk a lot about that in the book.
Weren't you the...
Well, I want you to answer what do you think of the kind of information, the interview of Scott McClellan with David Letterman, and then the interview of Scott McClellan, I think, with Katie. So, and again, look at this screenshot, okay? She's a popular star, Angelina Jolie. She's talking about a mighty art. What do you think this is? Do you think this is entertainment, or do you think this is advertising, or do you think this is publicity, or do you think it's wrong? Okay, so I want you to do this as an exercise. That's very, very important. The point of today is we're going to look at agenda of news literacy, and I want to again start this class with a question. What are some of the powerful television images that you can think of? If someone is to ask me, my first thing would be what I think I was working as a news reporter with a national channel, and I think it was pretty late in the night. I was at my desk working on a copy for the next day, and my boss said, like, Rajvi, you got to come inside the edit suite. I was like, so what happens is, so I was working in a national channel in India. At that point in time, we used to get a satellite news feed. There is something called Associated Press. There's something called Reuters. There's something called Asian News International. So we have a subscription with these satellite agencies where they send in satellite feed from US, from Australia, from Africa, from Europe, because we need instant, live images. So back in those days, I'm talking about 10 to 12 years back, when we wanted access to this, we had to pay thousands of dollars monthly to these agencies where they uplink the footage through satellite and we get the link footage. And we just got the footage of the Twin Tower collapse. I was like, what the hell, man? How could this even happen? And what I was thinking is, I think that was the time also the movie True Lies came. And there is one of the scene where, this one of the jet craft was planned to come and go and crash onto a building. And I was just thinking, oh, actually, sometimes True Lies was a movie that came prior to 9/11. And I was thinking, like, oh, people also get some kind of ideas watching, all this kind of movies and all that. Maybe, hey, maybe let's try to do something. And then they got Mohammed Atta and all the other people to come together, came up with the master plan. I think that's a master plan of the century here. Even though it result in the death of so many innocent people, but technically speaking, they kind of orchestrated this in a big way. They recruited people, they sent them for training in the United States, and then they later attacked the Twin Towers and all that. So again, there's a lot of conspiracy theory based on that, but the point is that television image stuck to me for a long time. And again, there are many images that comes to my mind, and yeah, that's one of the most powerful images that I can think of. I don't know. Each one will have their own subjective way of looking at things, but this is an image that I think it will stay in my mind for a long time to come. Uh, the next thing is information overload. This is very true with the internet era because you can practically have access to any information. Anything that you want under the sun, you can have info. You want to know about cooking, you can find information. You want to know how to build a table from scratch, that's information. So there's no information that you can get. Like, you can pretty much get anything under the world, except for one thing, except for making someone to love you. I think you can pretty much do anything with the information. I think that's one story. I don't know whether you're familiar with Aladdin and Genie. The genie will say, I can do anything for you. I can, do magic, anything, but except for making someone to love you, I can do anything. Similarly, with the internet, yes, you can find someone to love on internet, but you cannot force someone to love you because of the availability of the information. So there are so much of information. If you go to Google or Bing or any other search engines, if you type in anything that you're looking for, you'll be given tons and tons of information. But are those information credible? Are those news that you're looking at is credible? Whether you can trust the news and make decisions and live with it. For instance, you're going to a place which is affected by Zika virus. Do you think you have to take a Zika virus vaccine or not? How do you think you should act? Because those are information that can affect you or your loved ones. Imagine your sister or yourself or your someone else is going to a Zika infected places, and the news that place is Zika infected. So would you warn your loved ones or not? Obviously yes, right? Because we want our loved ones to be safe. So how do you access so much of information and make decisions that it can have an impact in your life and in your loved one's life? And that's what we're going to talk about: news literacy. It is the ability to use critical thinking skills to judge the reliability and credibility of news report via print, TV, or the internet. As I told you, like, we are flooded with so much information and we fall for it. You know what? I shared the link in the previous class about a man ejaculating in the swimming pool and 8 women got pregnant. It was a fake news. And you know what? One of my friend is a PhD student. I think he's a instructional technological specialist, where you kind of does modules for online classes and all that. And he told me, "Hey, did you see this man?" And blah blah blah. Like, man, are you really really serious about this? He thought that was genuine. So people really fall for that. I'm talking about people who are well read, who have a doctoral degree in their specialty. They fall for all these fake news. And who are we are nothing, right? So it's very important that we should be always be looking out for what is credible, what is reliable, and what is fake. And this is what we are going to learn in detail in this class. And we are going to use this concept of VIA: verification, independent, and accountability. And we will look into it in detail. Okay, so what is verification? As I told you, news literacy, it is the ability to critically judge the reliability and credibility of news information via the print, the online, or the web. Verification: classifying the information and evaluating the evidence and sources. So imagine, take for instance, we discussed the Malaysian pool story, okay? And a lot of people thought that was real news. I mean, nobody said it was false. None of the people in the entire class, I think so far I've evaluated most of it, and I think none of you have said, oh, it's fake news. No. People are, oh man, it's gross and blah blah and all this stuff, but nobody said it's a false news. Why? Because you don't know how to classify information. And this is what, whether we need to know, we have to evaluate the evidence and sources. So if you're looking at any news article, look at these 4 questions. Did the reporter use judgmental language? Is the evidence direct or indirect? Are the sources named or unnamed? Were multiple sources included in the story? So this is what is important, okay? Whether it's by a reporter or not, whether it cites people, name, or the designation, whether something that we can look online and see whether the information is credible or not. So when we see anonymous sources, when we don't see any names at all, then that's a red flag. Then the use of language, that's also very important. So this is how you classify the information, verify and evaluate the evidence and sources. It might even come from a very credible organization, but it can be even fake, because it's from CNN, it's from BBC, it's from Fox. Oh, okay, that must be good. No, the organization may be good, but the content sometimes can be or cannot be. So this is what you have to look for. Classify the information and evaluate the evidence and sources, whether it's something that is reliable and credible. Second is independence. The information was gathered independent of special interests, governmental, or corporate pressure. So sometimes we don't know whether the story is there because of some reason, and whether the author or the reporter was paid for coverage or anything. So this is something that you might ask this question: how am I supposed to know that? If you don't know that, then you don't think that's independent, okay? For instance, there was a mayor in New Mexico where he was writing for a local newspaper in a pen name or using a pseudonym, and talking about, oh, the mayor is doing such a good work and all that. He was actually promoting himself by writing about himself, okay, but using a different name. So how was the people supposed to know? Okay, if I am a reader of that newspaper, okay, if I don't know this news reporter, I think I don't have to even rely on what he's saying. And that is what we need to be very careful about. Look at the background of the people or the organization it represents, whether they are biased or not. You will have an understanding of, you obviously, when you watch Fox, obviously the information that you're going to get is going to be biased. And if you're going to MSNBC, it's the same thing. So when you look at certain platforms, you have an understanding, well, this TV or this organization is obviously going to support this party or the other party. So again, we all need to have this kind of sense of understanding of how these organizations work, and whether they have any kind of affiliations towards certain organizations. So this is very important. Independence. And sometimes some article, when the writer is writing a story about some organization, at least they should mention, oh, I was working at this organization in my 10 years back or something like that, so that the viewers or the audience are understanding that there is some kind of openness about this particular author. So that is important, independence. And the third one is accountability. Accountability in the sense, well, if you read some news or anything, is there any way where the people can leave a feedback, or redress their questions, or highlight the, okay, this is something wrong about this. So if there is some kind of mechanism that is present within the news, then that's kind of signals accountability. So the reporter should be able to be contacted by the audience, and then later they should make some kind of correction, because I think we've seen some of the newspapers when New York Times make, oh, last week we carried Senator John McDonald, or it name supposed to be Senator John McCain or something like that. It was an error and we apologize. So there is a mechanism in place with that particular organization where they make some kind of corrections at some point later. So again, make sure they have a byline for the article, and can you trust the reporter's training as a journalist? Is the reporter accountable to anyone besides himself or herself? Did the reporter gather the information from all sides justly and equitably? And can I reach the reporter if I have questions about the information? So look at some of this aspect and see whether you can have this kind of system in place to reach them. If any of this thing is missing, then it's definitely a red flag. So again, verification, independent, accountability, these three concepts is very fundamental to understand news literacy, and try to use this in various situations and understand whether the news is credible or not. So it's not a very big deal at all, okay? And I want to share with you an information. I was looking online, so reading some news article, and I was reading this news, and I was really stunned because it looked so credible, okay? Just in, Barack Obama's daughter murdered in drive-by shootout in Chicago, July 20th, 2017. Breaking news that it's this Wednesday evening, Barack Obama's daughter was murdered in a drive-by shootout near her school. So as soon as we see, we tend to kind of flip, and immediately I kind of went and looked online, and just in it says with breaking news, it says. Barack Obama's daughter murdered in drive-by shootout. Okay, and see, look, it came in July 19th. So there are a lot of. Do you think this is true? Definitely not, right? Because we know, if it's a news, then it must be all over the place. But again, there are lots of platforms and channels where they're promoting all this kind of fake news constantly here, which is sad because people fall for it. Imagine the politics, okay? People just start something just as fun, and it becomes viral. Then everybody knows this is kind of fake, but then people think it's true no matter what you say. You see, a lot of people think vaccine is the reason for autism in this country. That was just a fake research which was done by the author and was published by Nature. The author himself retracted, saying, I'm sorry, I made a mistake. I just wanted to get in to the publication, so I just made that up. But it's gone beyond this reach. Even though the author himself acknowledged that what he did was wrong, a lot of people in this country still believe that vaccine causes autism. No matter what you see, a lot of my friends, they don't want to get the kids vaccinated because they think, oh, this creates autism. Because of what? Because of this misinformation. So people, online is great. Okay, if I just go online, for instance, I'm going to go to google.com and I'm going to say, what is the latest news? So I'm going to get lots of news. Imagine, I'm getting in 0.89 seconds, I'm getting about 551 million results, okay? And that's the beauty of internet. You have a lot of information. At the same time, there are also a lot of fake and not reliable information. And this is what you should be very careful about. So let's see and apply the concept of VIA with regard to this particular news article. Okay, so as I told you, VIA, verification, independence, and accountability. What is verification? Well, whether the sources in this article are named, whether they are multiple sources. Okay, we are giving a lot of stuff. Well, we have breaking news: Barack Obama's daughter was murdered in a drive-by shootout near a school. Sasha Obama, the daughter of Barack Obama, the swing was murdered by organized spelling. Drive-by shootout. Okay, these are like some red flags. The shooting happened around 6 p.m. when Sasha was leaving a school class. She reportedly needed to be picked up by security guards who waited at the front door of the school. Then a black Nissan passed by, shooting through their window, shooting Sasha and one of the security guards. The police started a pursuit right away because there was a police car nearly. Look at the language. The ambulance came right away, telling by the witnesses, but they couldn't save her. The attackers were caught by the police and they're currently in custody, and we don't have any information about them. They can face a life sentence. So you can see there are no sources here. Just pretty much they are only telling us a story. So that itself is a red flag. And look at the grammar, okay? It's so poorly written. So definitely it is not by any professional journalist. So these are some of the things that there are no citations, or there is no citing of people involved, no sources, no authorities. So this is definitely a red flag. So it doesn't pass the verification stage. Independence, whether the organization is independent or whether the author is reliable or not. I don't see anything. News Bible report, news all around the world, I've never heard of this site before. So that is a red flag. And it's by admin. Like, what, an administration writes this news? So definitely this is again a red flag. So there is no thing of any reporter taking accountability for this. So I think this is also something I wouldn't trust with. And again, that is what we need to understand. Is there any way where people can leave the comment or anything? And look at this other thing. When we see this, there are so many other things. Oh, tinnitus, trick to stop the ringing. Okay, come on, please don't ever pour oil in your ears. And again, some of the things to kind of make your sex life last better. So these are, oh, look at the small things in print, sponsored links. People tend to ignore this and think, oh man, these are very important news articles and all that. So again, these are some of the things that we need to keep in mind, whether you need to trust this article or not. So if I were you, this does not pass the via concept. So this is not a credible or a reliable news information, and this I'm not going to share with my friends or my followers, period. I think I can do one more concept so that you can get familiar. So take for instance this one, 45 After Dark, the Much Ado edition, Much Ado edition, whatever. I don't know the intention of this, Much Ado, Much Ado. Well, this is everywhere. It's all about the news that Sean Spicer is out of the White House and he's been replaced by Sarah Huckabee Sanders, and Anthony Scaramucci is the new director. And let's look at this. We are looking at verification. We are looking at how the sources are being quoted, how the languages are, all the writer. Josh Dorsey reports. Spicer came to the White House on a Thursday completely unaware President Donald Trump was planning to meet with Anthony Scaramucci, a longtime Wall Street friend, and other topics including Reince and Steve also had no clue, and blah blah blah. Of course, Spicer's fall or at least his departure meant another roguish figure. I see. How can you use a word roguish for another person? That's not something right? So you can just, I can't say, well, Jared is a roguish guy or some. So you have to understand the kind of language that people use. And again, professional journalists, they avoid doing all this stuff. Uh, Entrepreneur and financier was been a big public backer of the president, ascended to a key post. So there it shows that as if this guy is got some kind of affiliation with the president, and this is all allegations. Like, we really don't know whether this is true or not. So this is completely the author's opinion. So there are not much, even though there are a lot of things within quotes. Um From Davos, Switzerland to his own lavish hedge fund conference in Las Vegas is the center of power in the chaotic Trump White House. He's now charged with repairing talks between the press and the president, who regularly rips what he calls the fake news media. So I think I'm not very happy with the sources cited, and I'm not even happy with the language used. So I think it does not pass the verification. And I think Henry C. Jackson, I think, looks like he's got a lot of followers. I can look him up online. He's a writer, editor, and Californian. He's 45 years, so he's from Politico, and he's based in Los Angeles, California. And he's got about 2,000 followers, and he's following about 2,000 people. He's got about 4,000 followers. This is false. Don Jr. only revealed his emails once he learned that New York Times already had them in an attempt to preempt the story. Donald Trump, my son Donald. Okay, so it looks like he has got a very credible Twitter site, Twitter White House reporter for Washington Post at MSNBC. So she is actually responding to this guy, which means it's something that is well connected. You got some kind of connection, but I would not really fall for this. I don't think it is independent because I feel that even though he's got kind of some kind of credibility, but I just still feel very iffy about it. Maybe I think this guy might not have any affiliation going by what I'm seeing, but still I'm a little bit hesitant because he didn't pass my first test. And the last one is accountability. Whether this um, this as any place for this organization to have some kind of feedback about the quality of the story or any correction that's being made. So there is way to reach him, politicocg@gmail.com. So there are ways to connect with the author, fine. And yeah, even though that's satisfying, I mean, Politico is also kind of a site where they discuss about political developments and events. I still feel that this news site has not passed my news credibility test. So I would definitely not trust this to pass it on to my followers or my friends. So this is how you develop, okay? And again, there is nothing called right or wrong. So again, it's very subjective, right? But follow the simple concept: verification, independence, and accountability. If a news article does not satisfy these list, then that is not credible. That is not a reliable source of information, and that is the key aspect of news literacy.